trying to do that in 2 weeks, or?
Oh, I thought it was 2 weeks for this item
We're
7.
going to come back on this review.
For item 7.
Yeah, item
Correct.
7. But no, I think that other one's going to take a little
A
longer.
little longer, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll continue that for 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Items 8, 9, 10, and 11 were approved on consent with instructions. Item 12 is a CEO report relative to a supplemental agreement with the Parking Network Incorporated for the continuation of the parking occupancy tax discovery program.
And Ms. Grill's going to lead on 12 through 17.
You're going to miss me after this. I know my issue on this one was why it had taken us so long because the contract has expired in March, and whether or not we lost any money in that March to now.
No, we haven't. Actually, there were two issues that delayed the release of our RFP. One, we had received advice from City Attorney that there was some language in RFP that we were issuing on our sales and use tax that required revision because of potential legal issues in the selection process of the proposers. And then number two, there was a challenge by one of the unions in regards to the contracting out of our parking occupancy tax audit services, and the issue there particularly impacts the ability of our staff to generate additional revenue from their normal business tax audits as opposed to our contractor, who has more of a investigative type of experience in conducting these audits. Our audit staff doesn't really deal with fraud types of audits, so we were challenged on that, and we provided information during that process. So those were the two primary delays. As far as revenue, no, we do have staff that are currently working on it, so we do have our own staff that are currently engaged in the compliance of the parking lot operators.
So I guess my question is, this you're going out to RFP to select a contractor in the future. This is extending the current contract
Correct.
that is before us. And I guess they've been operating without a contract since March, or we haven't been using them since March?
They have been conducting investigations. They haven't actually been performing audits. They've been working on audits that they had actually performed in the past while they were under contract, and they are currently working on investigations, preliminary audits, so they haven't actually submitted audits during some of this period, but they are preparing work, and they are gathering the information to submit the audits based on their preliminary investigations.
Okay, so that'll go through the end of this year, their current contract?
Correct.
Okay. And it's by, as I understand it, it's by a percentage? You get a percentage of what you get?
It's contingency fee-based, correct.
I guess a better way to describe it, thank you. But that I think it's yielded about $1.5 million for the city of Los Angeles.
Yes, for the current period, we're roughly around $1.4 million, and fees paid for this current fiscal year are $380,000. Since the inception of the contract, the cumulative additional POT revenue generated for the city is right around $6.1 million, and fees paid have been roughly around $1.7 million.
And I know this is something that has been helpful in catching those that haven't been paying their fees, and the commission, LAPD, has been working very closely with the police permit commission. Am I calling it correct? Sorry.
Richard Teefank, Executive Director of the Police Commission. It's the Police Permit Review Panel.
Police Permit Review Panel. So, and I know they had would you mind just giving a quick
Sure.
review on the hearings you've held recently that have brought in some additional funds, and this was based on something we adopted in the budget last year, which allows us to take away their police permit if they've not been paying this tax.
Yes, ma'am. For the committee's information, in May there were 5 cases that were presented to the Police Permit Review Panel by the Office of Finance that had exhausted their administrative remedies through the Office of Finance and were delinquent in paying their parking occupancy tax. Prior to those coming forward to the Police Permit Review Panel,
We might just do
one of those cases was settled by the operator. That brought 4 cases to the panel, 3 of which resulted in, between negotiations with the Office of Finance and the permit holders, the city was made whole on those delinquent fees, and that was to the total of $22,318. The other operator did not appear, did not request a hearing, had their permit revoked, and I believe their outstanding amount is $64,000. The last communication we've received from the Office of Finance is the remaining delinquent operators are either not in business any longer or have had their permits expired. As they identify other operators, the process is now in place, and they would move forward to us in a much more expeditious manner. Office of Finances are doing a review of all of the permits that they have to identify that there is a valid permit for a lot. If they find that there is not a valid permit for a lot, they will give that information to Commission Investigation Division, and we will go out and do field enforcement. So that's the status of where we are today, so I would defer to Office of Finance for any other comments on that.
Yeah, and I've kind of gone into item 15 as well, so sorry about that. They're connected because this auditing that you do identifies where there are problems and they haven't paid, and permit and the ability to revoke it. But if you want to add anything from Office of Finance on this, so we might take both of these together on that. But this contract is one that helps get you the information that you then are able to refer to the police commission. Am I accurate in that? Okay. I wasn't totally crazy in putting the two together.
No, and I know the question was posed too about a number of operators that appeared on our top debtors list. And what we've done is a review and determined that most of those, all but one in fact, are non-permitted. And we're doing a review of all of those now to determine whether or not they are in fact still operating and in business, or they're in fact their permit has been canceled and they're no longer operating.
They're no longer operating. So some are
the liability would still exist.
Still exist for what they owe us. Yes,
correct.
To be able to go after that. And I know the city attorney is pursuing those, particularly the one parking lot that hasn't been paying at all. And this is a really big issue. I know that again, both Office of Finance and LAPD working at has been really helpful to coordinate that. But millions of dollars, with they collecting that little 10% when you see how much it is, that people aren't giving it to the city of Los Angeles. And so you're doing a great job in that way, and hopefully to kind of pursue that. And I think they know we mean business. We're going to take away that permit and pursue them. So it's been a good success in that way. But this contract helps because they're the ones that can go out and do that investigation and literally check to see if you say 100 cars came in and the contractor says, no, in fact, there were 200 cars that came in that day, we're able to pursue them. So I think this is great to move forward and hope we can get the RFP, get that back and have that ready to go.
My only question is that in the past, when we've had these contingency contracts, it seemed like they were no more than 15%, and this one is, what, 27%? Is that because of the uniqueness of the operation?
Yes, and there were varying percentages that applied depending on the volume of revenue that was generated. So at this particular point, you're correct. I believe it is at a 27.5% fee that is being paid, but essentially it is a unique service that is being provided by the contractor, and as I said, it's more of a fraud type of audit in terms of ensuring compliance, where our staff is more engaged in a compliance audit. So the functions that the contractor performs are unique, and while our staff can do it, it would entail much more of their time, and it would divert them from the audit penetration that we currently enjoy right now.
I mean, are the tasks significantly more unique than, like we give 15% for those that go out and chase down people that owe us business license tax or putting liens against them? I'm just trying to get a sense of what
is it before answer? I think more. I don't know the percentages and the difference. This is a more investigative kind of thing versus we know you owe it, you have to pay us. It is they have to catch them not paying us, and I think that was, at least my understanding, was the reason behind it is they literally have to do some investigative work and sitting outside a parking lot and seeing who's going in and out versus just calling saying you owe us money.
That's correct.
Sorry, I mean,
no, that's correct. Essentially,
we've gotten into this issue here. So.
Right. Essentially, the contractors, they're on site and they're doing their preliminary reviews, which give them the basis to extrapolate when the parking lot operators don't provide sufficient information to arrive at a determination of what their liability is. So it's much more labor intensive.
And then, I wasn't familiar, what was the issue on item 12, that EA's lawsuit? What did that entail?
Well, their issue was that rather than contracting out, that Office of Finance staff could perform this work, but obviously, given the fact that a business tax audit can't be conducted with a framework that taxpayers are committing fraud, because we would never have the ability to reach as many taxpayers as we can in terms of using our resources. A fraud audit is a much more labor-intensive, time-consuming effort than a regular business tax audit is.
Thank you.
I'm just curious where the CAO reports that the Discovery Program, because just talked about that, has yielded approximately $1.51 million in additional revenues to the city, of which $0.41 million was compensated to the vendor. When they report in and we go back and we check it out and we find out and we're collecting more money, what do we do with that particular vendor? Do we get rid of them, never bring them back? What happens?
Well, let me clarify. These are individual taxpayers or parking lot operators. They're not city vendors. They're private entities who are subject to the city's business tax. They're also subject to the duty to collect and remit the parking occupancy tax to the city. So they're not vendors that are contracted with the city.
Yeah, but still saying that, they're not paying their fair share of taxes, is what we've found.
And that's what we go through our compliance efforts, as Mr. Teefank and Mr. Whitmore indicated. What we will do is we will go through the Office of Finance's collection efforts in order to attempt collection. If that's not successful, we have various courses of action, which include referral to the city attorney for litigation. They also include referral to the Police Commission Investigation Division for revocation of the police permits, as well as other collection activities.
But do we keep a list of these groups that we now know for a fact haven't been doing their fair share? And what can we do so that annually they do pay their fair share? I mean, how do we stay on top of these people?
Well, the main activity is again, our collection efforts. For example, one of the items that I neglected to mention, it includes posting on our top debtors list. So we have a variety of functions that, yes, we do maintain, and we do continually look at these entities to ensure that they're paying. If they're not paying, then we do issue assessments, and we do follow up with our collection efforts. So they are on the radar, and we are taking a variety of actions to attempt collection.
We're doing an audit right now on this. Do we know how many have actually coughed up the money, or do we know how many are still through various processes?
I believe Mr. Whitmore is looking at that information. We don't have that information before us, but we can obtain that information.
Well, it would be interesting to know exactly what we're looking at potentially bringing in, and then the hoops we have to go through to bring them in. And I'd like a report on that so we get a better picture of the whole picture. And hopefully, when we put them in a special category, that puts them into their best behavior mode, or is there anything else we can do?
Well, for example, one of the items in number...
like, can we shut them down?
In number 17.
Because you're not
Well, actually...
doing your thing?
Actually, that's what we are working in concert with the Police Commission to ensure that we do shut them down, and we go through the revocation process. So if their permit is pulled, they are unable to continue business.
Yes, let me speak to that. May 27th, when we had our panel meeting, two of the vendors who were at that meeting, their permits were immediately suspended until payment was made. Payment was made within days, because the fact you were impacting their financial livelihood, because they're getting 90%, we're only getting 10%. And so I think that effort is well taken care of now. And what we did with those two vendors is we sent our Commission Investigation Division officers out the next day to ensure that they were not in operation until they paid their fees.
How many vendors do we have in a gray area or under a targeted area, or that we know still haven't done it?
Well, there are roughly 1,700 parking lot operators in the city. So obviously some of those are in full compliance, and they also are seeking a level playing field for those parking lot operators that are not complying.
So how do we go and take a list of all 1,700 methodically go down the list and check, or are we doing it?
Yes, we are. We're doing that both through our own audit process, through the contractors' obligations to perform for Office of Finance, as well as through our collection efforts. So we can identify how much revenue is in the collection process and how many parking lot operators are not in compliance.
I'm good. I'd like to get that information. Report back for us.
Okay.
Great.
It's really, I mean, again, this is going to be great if we're able to get all the money in the one company that hasn't been paying for years. And I know another thing that they're all looking at as well is when they pay the 10% based on, we talked about this the other day, Richard, which is, let's just say it's $10. Normally you go down and you park in the parking lot, it's $10, they pay a 10% tax to the city. Then on a very special day when there's a big event nearby, they charge $20. But they're still only paying on the $10. And so they're supposed to notify us, and I know that's something that...
That's one of the pieces that we did. We did an inventory now, it's probably 8 to 12 months ago, of all the parking lot operators in the city under the Los Angeles Municipal Code. They're required to notify the police commission of their rates. They can have varying rates, but they have to post those rates during the time that that rate might be in effect. So at noon it might cost you $10. At 9 o'clock at night it might cost you $25. They have to notice us of those rates and then post those rates. So we have that complete inventory. It gets updated on a monthly basis by us. And what our folks do, they go out and they will do field inspections to ensure that, one, the rates are posted, two, that we have the rates on file, and three, they have a permit during the Lakers Championship Series. It's prevalent during football season at the Coliseum in that area, prevalent at Staples, and we'll go out and do field enforcement with Central Division on those particular entities to try and make sure that they're, one, having permits, and then two, they have their rates posted appropriately, and so the city is receiving their 10% of what they're charging.
Very good. Do we have any sense how much more money is out there for us that we could conceivably get?
I think it's a little early in that process, but we definitely can provide a projection for you. But as we go through this process, we can compile something definitely.
Yeah, I'd love to.
She would say, it's, again, if we're successful, in the millions.
Yes, definitely.
It's millions.
No, it's 10.
It's millions. 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 So, again, the hope is that with I was going to say the carrot and the stick, but I think it's just the stick right now. We tried the carrot, didn't work so much. So, and the other part, which is kind of connected, since you're all up here, is item 15, colleagues, which is says if you get caught not paying, underpaying or not paying, and you want to do business in the city, that potentially we would look at installing parking revenue control equipment, which means you have to take a ticket, and again, there are ways they can get around that, but it's not cash. And so I think that we would ask them to come back and see what options available. I'm not sure if it takes an ordinance or what it would be able to do to do that.
No, definitely would take an ordinance, and there are two different methods that are under discussion. One is a ticketing process, and the second would be actual installation of revenue control equipment. Office of Finance has looked at this, and our preliminary direction is that we would make a recommendation that for those repeat offenders or those individuals that have gone through the entire administrative appeal process with Office of Finance and have been referred to Police Commission for revocation of the permits, or they're operating without a permit, that they be required to install this equipment. There are advantages over the paper ticket method. Number one, the electronic equipment can be programmed so that if it's turned off, our audit staff would be able to identify the period and duration where the equipment has not been in use. Also, there are tracking reports can be generated from this equipment. Obviously, from a operator perspective, one of the issues that has to be dealt with is the cost of the equipment, also the duration of the use of the equipment. Let's say if if a operator becomes compliant and they generate that, they are able to identify that they are paying and they are complying for a particular period, whether that equipment stays in place. And there are also physical limitations as far as available parking spaces may have to be reduced. But again, that would be part of the carrot and the stick factor. So the preliminary direction that finance is going is would rather than issuance of paper tickets, which many of the operators do right now, and they're not in compliance, that we would be coming forth with the recommendation that there be installation of this equipment.
But it's important to note with the current ordinance that we have referring these cases to the Police Permit Review Panel, we have a much more efficient and quicker way to deal with these individuals. As we found out in the two cases, once they were suspended, we had immediate payment. So I think that we have that ability through the police permit to regulate them and to have them be on their best behavior. Once we notice who the scofflaws are, then we can pay particular attention to them through that process.
And again, in some ways you'd say we don't want them to ever operate again if they've been cheating the city, and we shouldn't really give them a permit again. But, there may be some that, again, underpayment or whatever that we require in them. But I think, so is the next step for you all to just come back with a report on your recommendations?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And we'll
It'll
get
be
an
in your hands.
analysis of the 1,700, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Did I miss anything?
No, I'm just looking forward to her going across the hall.
Well, we're going to work together on all of these things. So.
That'd be
All right.
good. It'll help us.
So that was, I think, 12 and 15
Yes.
to take care of?
Yes. The next item on the report is item 13, which is a LACERS report relative to historic city contribution information.
Do you want to leave this one? I think
What
this
is
is
that,
yours,
13?
13. I think
Yeah.
that's yours. And then we can do 14 and the others after this.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I think this came out of the budget hearings, and what, I just wanted to know, in looking at the, I guess, 10 or 12-year history, what was the, or occurred in our system, if you could explain to us, like 95, 96, and then 203 and 4, that made such a significant jump where we were, our 95, 96 had dropped, looks like almost 4 percentage points, and then in 03, 4 to 04, 5, we jumped almost 6 percentage points. Do we have any timeline of what occurred in our history that made those things happen?
Sure. Sally Choi with LACERS, and I'm here with Tom Mattis, our Assistant General Manager. Basically, the things that really affect the contribution rates include the investment returns. So it's the overall cities or the pension plans investment returns that has the greatest impact on the contribution rates. So what you'll notice in those years that you just highlighted, it trails really downturns in the market. And then you'll also see contribution rates declining in certain areas, and that's because it's following the upturn, when the market's improved. And with our asset smoothing, you see a lot of the impact of this market volatility smoothed over a period of time. So if you look at the case of the 95-96, what that followed was really where the contribution rate went from 13.7% of pay to 9.64% of pay. That followed, let's see. If we look at investment returns in that same period, you see that we had some So you'll see that we had some double-digit positive returns beginning in 1995. We had our investment hurdle is 8%. That's our assumed investment return that we're going to achieve over the long term on average. And
I know we've had some discussions on it. Is that realistic? And I know we had some chamber folks who visited us a while back who I think probably bet with all of us. Mr. Rubalcava, who suggested the 8% was unrealistic. I don't know.
Historically, yes. If you look at our 15-year investment returns, on average, we've exceeded 8%. Now, due to most recent market effect, particularly this year, it's going to be something that we're all going to be revisiting. And the investment return assumption is something that we look at routinely because we look at our time horizon, our investment horizon is more like 15 or 30 year, whereas a typical investor, you're looking at a 5-year market cycle. So we have a much different time horizon that we have to consider. But considering the order of magnitude of losses we've experienced, we're looking at, is this an anomaly? Is this a trend going forward? So all of that is being looked at right now as we're doing asset allocation, but we'll be doing a much more comprehensive review of that in the coming year. So we will definitely be revisiting that, and that's something that everyone is going to be looking at. So at this point, we don't think it's unrealistic, but we will be looking at that investment assumption again, because it's the real rate of return that you look at, but also inflation factor as well. But again, beginning in 95, we saw double-digit returns of 14.9% and 16.7%, and then 19.2% in 97. So those gains, we recognize only 1/5 of it each year, so that gets smoothed over a number of years, and that's why you see the contribution rates go down, since the investment income was much higher. And then in the tech bubble burst in 2000, 2001, while the contribution rate was still very low because of the previous high returns, then we started recognizing those big losses where we had negative returns of minus 4.2% in 2001 and minus 4.8% in 2002, and then it started getting positive at 4.5, but that was still under our assumed rate of 8%, so that's still considered a loss. And then you'll see slowly, as we're slowly recognizing those losses, that the contribution rates started to climb from 8.26% and it jumped to 14.3%. And so basically you see the contributions rate trailing the market returns. Now, in 05, you'll also see that the contribution rate did increase to 18% or close to 19% of pay, and that had a lot to do with us changing our assumptions relative to the OPEB, the other post-employment benefits. That's your retiree health subsidy. So the city, unlike many other or most other pension plans, actuarially pre-funds the health liability. Most other systems pay as they go. So they get a bill each year and they just pay it out of the general fund, whereas the city puts away money for retiree health benefits. So back in 05-06, due to some accounting requirement changes where the city and the system has to report the health liabilities, we made a slight change in our actual funding for that, so that did have a temporary increase in the contribution rates. And then, again, following some of the negative returns, it just took us a little while for the contribution rates to slowly move down. So it was... you'll see from 05-06, it was at 18.96%, went up as high as 23.86, and then slowly started coming down. And so for this fiscal year, the new fiscal year coming up, 09-10, the contribution rate did go down from 20% to 19.43%, again, because of the previous 4 years of double-digit returns. But as we've reported in the past, depending on what the market does tomorrow, and please light a candle. The market ended positive today, so hopefully that trend will continue tomorrow. It will determine what the contribution rate will be for the 10-11 year.
Tomorrow's date, particularly.
Yes, June 30th, that's the date.
Close of the quarter.
Big day, okay.
What's that?
Close of the quarter.
Close of the quarter, exactly.
Now, the other day you were mentioning with 19%, is that in 2 years that you speculate will go to 40%?
Right. That was based on a couple of different scenarios, assuming a market loss of, I think we've ran about maybe 12 different scenarios of market returns. But the three that we reported to you was one with a 30% loss June 30th, a 25% loss June 30th, or a 20% loss June 30th. So using that middle road, the 25%, and then assuming next year we make 0, and then 8% thereafter, yeah, the contribution rate would go from 19.43% to 28.98%, and then ultimately to about 42% of pay, based on that one scenario. That will change depending on what the the investment returns are.
Okay. Any questions?
No?
Great.
continuing discussion on corridors and smoothing. Where are we on that discussion?
So the board has been going through a very comprehensive review of the asset smoothing and market corridor. We've had a very extensive discussion at the Audit and Strategic Planning Committee of the board. They considered a number of different scenarios and options, anywhere ranging from doing nothing to widening the market corridor to lengthening the asset smoothing period from 5 years to 7 years, 10 years, 12 years. And then looking at what is acceptable under the actual standards of practice, what is acceptable under the legal framework as fiduciary, what things and factors they can consider in making that determination of properly funding the system. So, and we had outside legal counsel or fiduciary counsel also present to give them that legal framework to work within. So based on that, they looked at considering widening the corridor without changing the asset smoothing period. 5 years is still the industry standard. There are a couple of systems that I've looked at going outside of that, but that's pretty rare. And I know of 2 other systems that have also recently approved widening the corridor from the 2120, 8120 to 4140 or 5150. It's the that's the ratio between the actual value of assets.
5150.
Well, 5150 is actually the one that the committee considered, is widening the corridor to 5150.
Yeah, okay, it means something to some of us.
I know.
Yeah.
So at this point, it's still under consideration. No final decision has been made, and we don't anticipate that the board will be considering this until sometime in September, which is when our actuary will be available for a full discussion.
Right.
But the main thing that the Fiduciary Council emphasizes is critical for our board to meet its obligation to the system and the members is to ensure that we follow a very, very tight process.
Yeah, and I have no problem with that. My concerns have always been the cyclical nature of the market, and that we smooth it as much as possible. And then as we're entering these phases, and I don't know if you're familiar with what's called the Kontratief economic cycle. Never heard of it? I'll get it to you. We're looking at a decade of volatility in the marketplace, probably, and it's sustained by a research project that was done by this Russian economist back in the 20s, before the big crash, who predicted it and predicted every single recession and depression we've had since then, within real term, within a year of it happening. And we're in now what he considers a 10-year volatility period, what's called a Kontratief winter. It's very interesting research project, and it's my concern that we remove as much volatility as possible. If we're really facing that kind of an economic cycle, then we take as much of that out of it as possible. So I'll get you that research. It's very interesting. But those are the concerns I've had all along, is that we really take the volatility out. That's what smoothing is all about, the quarters are all about. And we've seen that volatility for the last 18 months. And while it may not continue in the level we've seen it, it's going to continue for a long period out. So we have to be protected. All right. So
and realizing that there is unprecedented volatility in the market, one of the other recommendations from the committee was that the committee and board take another look at this again next year.
Yeah. Well, I just remember Bill Fujioka telling us 4 years ago when I first brought this out, is that the time to act is when the market goes bad. And I think we've sustained that. Is the time. This is the time. So if Bill was right, now's the time to do it.
Without getting into any politics here at this point, when we look at the chart, we see 2003, 2004 was 120 million. The city's contribution. And then obviously we see it almost double 2004, 2005. And then of course to where we are right now. What would be the prudent thing to do when we take a deep breath on how to bring this back under a control?
Well, I'll refer back to our formula on the contribution rates. So the contribution rates are determined actuarially based on investment returns, actuarial assumptions, and the like. But really what determines that contribution amount is your payroll. So even if a contribution rate were to go down, if your payroll goes up, because it's the contribution rate times the payroll, your actual dollar amount will still grow. So you have two things that the contribution rate is more difficult to control because of the market volatility and all other factors. If you make benefit changes, whatever, all of that impacts the contribution rates. But the payroll amount, that's something, if it grows, then your amount will grow regardless of the contribution rate. Or if you, keep the payroll base flat, then you'll have, less of an impact on the contribution amount. So that's an area, and you'll see that we also provided the information on the payroll growth, and you see that for a number of different reasons. The number of employees have grown. The part-time employees have been included into the LACERS system, and then you have the cost of the salary increases. That also grows the payroll base.
No.
Okay. We'll move item 13. Thank you very much.
Item 14 is a motion, Gruel Parks Garcetti, relative to the CAO and CLA to perform a thorough review of the city's financial policies. We can give a brief oral update on where we are in some of those, or if you wanted to start with any comments, please.
No, I think, I think our interest was, we did these great financial policies 4 years ago. I think it was 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, which gave us some direction, and I know that the CAO in some instances have said where we haven't been following, but it's probably with the economic downturn and changes an opportunity to review where we have fallen down maybe on those policies or where we should change them. And so I think that you may have staff talking about an evaluation of the city department's compliance, recommendations to improve and strengthen them, and make sure to distribute. Again, I'm not sure each department knows we have financial policies. But it would be, I think, something that would be helpful as we're planning for next year and as we talk about some of the challenges. So.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's, although we work on them individually, that's probably, I don't think any of us ever seen them collectively in one document to say, here's our financial policy. And so that would be helpful. But I think also we've added some, also just this fiscal year in this budget, we created that rainy day fund policy. We have 3 that we've asked to add. The MICLA policy, although we pay attention to the debt percentage, we need to look at how do we control the percentage per year so that we don't end up incrementally adding 23% debt without realizing it. And then 2 other items that we asked out of the committee was creating a loan policy for the Special Parking Revenue Fund and a loan policy for the AB 1290 funds, with 2 new ones that we asked that we come up with some wording so that these funds aren't swept and they're never repaid. And then I think the one item that we've been waiting for now for at least a couple of years is for the CRA, DWP, LAWA, and Harbor to adopt the city's financial policies. And so we understand that there was responses, but were viewed unacceptable and they went back. And so at some point we need to get those as quickly as possible for committee, because most of their reports reflect we're obligated to follow the debt policy, but not the city financial policy.
Yes, we do. Todd Bowie of our staff is here if you have any questions on that, but he's the analyst in our office that's been assigned to review the proprietary policies. And we have a set of all of them, and what he's doing is essentially comparing and contrasting the various policies, and we'll have some recommendations. But I think probably we're looking at a timeline for that of probably, I'm guessing, 30 to 45 days, and we'll have that report out. Is that in your timeline?
Yeah, I hope it's quickly as possible, because I think we've been waiting 2 years for that.
Right.
That we asked them to look at it, and then they ignored us for a year or so, and then finally they got serious and they reported, and then my understanding they didn't report on a format or address the issues as to the way we directed, and so we're in a 2-year cycle asking for the same information. So right. If we can, and the thing is, what I think when we first gave that task, what was important is they did not just say, we don't want to do this. They have to explain to us why this policy doesn't fit their operational platform as it relates to the department. Otherwise, just saying we don't want to do it doesn't help us understand. Or if they want to tweak it or something like that. But we've gone through all this effort, and 38 or 40 departments are using it. We have 4 that we've been waiting for 2 years to say we'll adopt it.
Right. The review of the debt policy, most of the proprietaries do have a debt policy. That's one thing in common, and that's going to be an extensive review, and it's very technical and very complicated. But for the most part, I think what Todd has found is that they, in CRA's case, they have more or less adopted the city's policies, and LAX, I think that is probably the same. The other departments have various policies that they consider they need for their operations, but obviously those operations are unique. But we'll point all that out in the report, and we are working on it.
And I think on the debt policy, another one I forgot about is that there was something I think the CAO came up with, that we had gotten a little bit out of sync on MECLA money. Historically, it was for bricks and mortar, and now 80% of it's being spent on soft items as opposed
Equipment,
to bricks and,
yeah.
So we were going to figure out how to get that balance back to.
Yeah, we'll also report on that. The city's financial policies, though, just since you had mentioned it before, they are posted online. They're on the CAO's website. The last time they were revised was April 2005, so we have to incorporate the policies that have been adopted by council since then. And then there's, as you mentioned, there's several new ones in the works as well. But at the time that we, to kind of comply with Councilwoman Gruhl's motion, at the time that we communicate with departments where these policies are, just to remind them, we'd want to reinforce the message in the motion that how important they are. And we'll probably take that opportunity as well to try to come up with some recommendations to enforce, make sure that they're complied with and that they're enforced.
Because what did we decide? They were policies as opposed to, we didn't treat them as ordinances. Is that right?
Yes, but there are some controls in place in the current policies. One that every report considered by mayor and council have some kind of statement on whether they're in compliance with the fiscal policies. There's a secondary one that council motions should also do the same thing as well.
I think we do that during budget hearings, but we don't quite get that done on a day-to-day basis.
I think the controls are in place. I think the next part is probably missing, which is reporting compliance with the controls, and then maybe looking at a process so that we can more smoothly integrate the review of the financial policies with everything that we do. Anyone?
Actually, as you mentioned that, I just think we ought to require that as the budget comes forward each year to the budget committee from the mayor, that we have a compliance statement on all those factors, that we have a statement of fact on where we are in compliance with all the policies before we begin the budget session.
Yeah. I think the only one we really get any narrative on is there may be a comment about one-time money. But other than that, I don't think there's much.
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right.
They would say,
Infrastructure,
same comment, we didn't get it this year.
Right, the 1%. Yeah.
I think, I mean, you talked about MECLA. I mean, my pet peeve has been as well with MECLA is committing funds to a project where there's no operating dollars ever focused on it whatsoever. And we had a lot of projects that should be part of any financial policy and a MECLA policy.
The timeline, I had talked to Ray Serrano about this, but the timeline he's projecting, the soonest he thinks we can actually get a draft report finished is about 90 days. The office is pretty much to a person looking at the operational plans submitted by departments, and that'll, he feels that will probably come first, and then the review of the financial policies would follow that.
I think the thing is, if we can stay close to that 90 days, I think all of us would be pretty happy to get it in that time. But in the interim, these issues such as we're going to have to bring forth the special event policy and bring it back at some point. And then the other one, even though it's taken Pete 8 years to write that ordinance, but also the what is it?
The budget
nonprofit
yes.
Locations, and then also as we're moving forward, because I think I'm concerned about the proprietaries and CRA. They're going to get behind the curve, because as we add stuff to it, they're just responding to Chapter 1.
Yeah.
And we've moved on to 3, 4, and 5. And so
Okay.
we need to get all those things, so we at least feel as though that there's some compliance.
Okay.
Great. So I think that's just instruction for them to report back. 16? No?
Yeah. Item 16 is a motion Gruel-Smith relative to the CAO and CLA to evaluate 50 recommendations from the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. And likewise, we can also provide an oral status if you wish.
We do actually have representatives from VICA. They're also here if they'd like to come forward. So I know some of actually the items that we discussed today, Stuart, are actually part of the items. For example, or part of things that we've been in the past, but there are three things that in the last couple of weeks have been talking about. One is bulk purchasing, for example, that the controller just came out with a GSD audit that talks about our city purchasing, which was an item number 38 they actually have on yours. And the other is on city elections and the increasing costs associated with city elections. And we moved away from doing them with the county as much, and how we would look at that. And then I had a firefighter actually talk to me this week at one of my town halls, he was talking about the use of overtime and that we really need to look at that. And so I know that's an ongoing issue. But
he was saying he wanted to increase it.
No, he said reduce it. I said talk to your fellow firefighters. But I know that there are some outstanding things that you all are going to talk, Stuart, if you want, a little bit on the uncollected debt and, of course, pensions and parking meter collections and consolidations and some other things. But we introduced this motion, I think, and make sure, and thank you for letting us hear to my last budget day, to see where we were on some of these items and to kind of keep pushing them, because in good times people go, oh, that's just a little bit of money, it doesn't matter. And now that we have clearly a fiscal crisis ahead of us, that some of these issues can be revisited or brought back to life. So I don't know if you wanted to comment at all.
Well, I'd like to thank you for looking at these items. These 50 items were put together by our staff and by our members, and we are hoping to hear that they are all feasible, that they will all save the city money, and that you're going to implement them immediately. Some of them are easy and simple, like eliminating calligraphy for city commendations, and some of them are much more difficult, like changing the city's pension plan for employees. But we're looking forward to hearing what the report is.
I can give you, if you want, a quick status on where we are in that report.
Let me ask you, how did we do that? Is the CAO taking this whole report and begin to walk through them, or are we giving them the different?
No, the CAO and CLA are both working on a report, but we had divided it into basically the 10 revenue ideas, and the CLA is drafting responses on those.
Right.
The other 40, the CAO has basically worked with departments to collect the information. And I just wanted to make at least one point today, which is, even though this had been introduced some time ago, the mayor, the city council, the controller all have paid attention to these, and 26, as we stand today, 26 of these are already implemented or being implemented.
26 of the 50?
Yeah, 26 of the 40 non-revenue ideas. I haven't seen the draft of the revenue yet. But our intention is to meet with VICA before we release reports, so that I think our time frame, if hopefully we can get the draft done within the next 30 days, and our intention would be to meet with VICA and discuss some of the draft findings that we have, and then release the report.
And I know the uncollected debt and the, it is one thing I want to look at across the street. What we've been talking about a lot of how to get into that, but I think they made some progress, but I think we can even do better.
So you said 26 of the 40. What have we made any impact on the 10 revenue ideas?
Donna Haglund with the CLA. I'm currently working on that. I'm probably 2/3 of the way through. For the most part, the city has addressed a lot of those, the revenue suggestions. In a way, a lot of them are in progress. Some of the first ones pertaining to LAWA, that's kind of happened. That one, probably the second one as well. And there's been some motions and some direction by the council in a number of these suggestions. So, departments in the city are currently in progress of kind of implementing them, looking at them. Number 5 clearly, is kind of a hot topic with the public-private partnership. So again, something that the city is currently exploring. So that's basically where we're at right now. We are implementing or looking at a lot of these suggestions already.
So is the intent to bring back to the council a comprehensive report dealing with all 50 ideas, or
Yes.
one of the things we lose track of when it comes in incrementally, that you can't?
No, we could submit a consolidated report on all 50 items, the status on all 50.
So you said, what did you say, 90 days?
I'm hoping to actually have the draft done in 30 days and then to meet with VICA shortly thereafter.
Yeah,
30
it's the
days.
completion.
That's great. Well, we look forward to it. Thank you.
We'll keep it on the burner and nudge us if we're not moving as fast. I know you all appreciate that as well. Yeah, I don't think so either.
Okay, the last item on the agenda is item 17, a motion, Gruel Parks, relative to the city attorney and Office of Finance to report on the feasibility of granting the Office of Finance the ability to administer liens on unpaid business tax assessments without having to refer the matter to the city attorney's office.
Good afternoon, Dan Whitley, Deputy City Attorney.
Jim McQuiston, do you want to speak before we do or after they've made their remarks? Okay.
I've been researching this issue for some time now, and unfortunately it's somewhat complicated. I'm going to need more time to finish up my analysis. Sure, I can tell you what I have. Certainly. Liens are normally a creation of statute, and there's no specific statutory provision to provide the city with the opportunity to directly record liens to secure its business tax liabilities from taxpayers or any of the other liabilities it normally imposes. So I'm continuing to research the issue and see what theories we can develop that would allow us to directly impose the liens without having to go forth and file lawsuits and collect a judgment. So that's where I am right now. And as soon as I develop some theory that will allow us to do this with some authority, we'll come back with a report.
And how long will that take?
Well, I hope to be done within a month. I want to make sure that whatever we come up with is solid enough for her to be able to support it in litigation, because we expect it to be challenged.
Office of Finance, this is kind of, you came, I'd like to take credit for this, but you all came up with a good idea, so.
Right. Well, we appreciate the city attorney looking into it, and we do realize we have had discussions with both Dan and Beverly Cook of City Attorney's Office. So we are more than willing to work forward with them, and whatever legal remedies are available to go through the lien process, we have every intent, if that's possible, to establish procedures that through our collections process we can implement that if that is what the legal analysis provides.
I look forward to the report.
Let me ask Department of Finance, did we get the ordinance passed that allows you to subtract the money from businesses we may owe if they owe us money? Is that?
It has not passed as of yet, but it is moving forward. And
Now, where is that? The council's acted on it, or where is that?
no, it has not gone forward to council yet, but that report, I would imagine, probably would be concluded within the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay, that's something that your department's working on?
Correct.
Okay, and the game plan is, before we pay people, we find out if they paid their business tax?
That is correct. I mean, and that is something we have talked to the city attorney about as well, and we just must make sure that there's no problems in moving that forward. But in terms of conceptually, that is exactly what we want to do.
Okay, and that's coming to this committee?
It will come to this committee.
So if quickly as you get that done, if you could let Kelly know, and then we can get it agendized.
Absolutely.
Right, and I suspect it will be in the form of a report. We have looked at both the charter, which authorizes this activity, and the procedures, as well as any legal implications, and it appears we don't have to amend the ordinance at all. So it's really a matter of procedure and protocol between the Office of Finance and the Controller's Office to make that happen. It's really not a legal issue.
Very good.
And this, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part. Did you say this is about people that are doing business with, is it?
We're business city that we're going to pay, but they owe us money.
Yeah, yeah.
We can subtract their business license from what we owe them.
No, that would be great. So look forward to working with you on that to make it happen with the Office of Finance, because I think it is a very important. And do we have any idea if has there been problems before, or we're just anticipating there are people who are doing business who haven't paid their business tax necessarily?
The only thing that, unfortunately, that we look at in the contracts is that the contractors initially register with the city. And so they have a correct BTRC number, and when they're paid, that's the only thing that's looked at. However, it does not guarantee that they have paid subsequent taxes in following years. So they can have a BTRC number but have not renewed, and so we're paying them, but they have outstanding delinquencies.
Beginning. Okay. Great. Any questions? Mr. McQuiston, one of you give up your seat for him?
Jim McQuiston, as much as I want to get this stuff collected as fast as possible, we still have a system of laws, and I am rather concerned if someone just assessed without some kind of a judicial process. I was hit by the Department of Finance once for $17,000 because they said I was in the business of parking lot. We have a business that has a parking lot, but it's for our employees, and it's not covered by the law, and yet we got this bill. We had to hire Roger Arnenberg to get us out of it, and he was the one that wrote the law. He was very surprised that this happened. And it is because we have so many employees and we can't keep track of everybody. There is this problem that some people are going to have to go through a process where it really was not deserved, and we don't want to get them to hate the city. There's so much that we charge everybody anyway. We don't want to charge them too much because there are some problems, which I've outlined in the past, that we may be a little bit over Article 13D anyway, and we don't want to have all of a sudden this thing come crashing down. And it could happen. We don't have a lot of saving clauses in a lot of our things, and we could find out that we have a mountain of legislation to go through, just like we had with the telephone tax, because somebody didn't write it properly to start with. So these are my concerns. And, of course, I've been in the federal judicial system for a long time, and it's much more ironclad in the federal system, so that's why I am more concerned with all these little niceties.
Thank you very much. We have another card. Before we close down, just wanted, in behalf of, we don't want you to think this is chauvinist, on behalf of the three men on the committee, we wanted to give you flowers.
Well,
please don't audit this stuff.
Yeah. I think
at least a year.
At least a year. I just want to say, and to the staff and everyone being on the budget committee has been a tremendous opportunity. And Greg and I chatted the other day about this. I think it maybe Bill too, about any council member. Every council member should serve at one point in time on the budget committee because you learn a lot through that process. And I'm partial. I think this has been the last several years have been the best, budget and finance committees. You've been an excellent chair, and clearly there's going to be a lot of opportunities, as shown today, that we can work together on controllers issues and saving the city, but it's really been fabulous. So I am going to miss these, and I probably, in my little bit of weaning off, will be listening to Budget and Finance in my office for at least the first couple of weeks. But thank you to all of you out here, because you've made it really, kind of, I have to say, I'm lost for words, because it's been really a lot of fun, and that's kind of nerdy in the budget side. I look forward to those late nights, Mr. Parks. But thank you to your staff, too, that have been great. And the next couple of days are going to be a little bit bittersweet. It hit me when Janice, someone came and handed me a proclamation to sign, and I was looking for my name, and it wasn't on there. And I said, "Oh, you must have made a mistake." And then I looked, and it said July 5th. So it was after they already started taking my name off. I said, "Add the controller." So, but anyways, I just thank you. It's been great to be in it. The flowers were wonderful thoughts. So.
We just don't want to hear that you're somewhere on a vacation listening to council phone.
No. But I just want you to be nice. Next year I'll be coming to you asking to not cut my budget as I sit on the other side.
Already.
So be nice. Well, no, I won't be asking you to cut. I'll be asking you for more money. That's actually what I'm saying.
Well, I might add, from my perspective, working with you on this committee, and this has been my first 4 years on the council, and then also working with you as chair of transportation.
We've spent a lot of time together, the three of us, actually, Mr. Parks.
The foundation, though, for your controller job comes out of a large part this budget and finance, and so I'm going to be very excited when you go down the hall on the other side, because you know these issues that you're grappling with here better than most people would. And so I think you've got the foundation to make you a fabulous controller.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I thought you were going to have the last word, but Mr. McQuiston.
Yeah. Oh, darn.
Got to have the last word. Jim McQuiston, since we're reaching the end of this session, you might say, I want to say, too, personally, I've been into these books for quite a long time, and I think we have the finest Budget and Finance Committee in the world. And I do want to say that we really appreciate the effort that you people put into this, because it's not easy, and Budget and Finance can create a lot of enemies and very few friends.
Kind of like controller, yeah.
I don't think the controller gets as much heat as the Budget and Finance Committee myself. But I did want to put that in because I really appreciate this, and I have been putting my 2 cents in, and sometimes you take my word and sometimes you don't, but I realize that the committee has to make the decisions, and if you don't make the right decisions, it's not the people that complain that are going to get the axe, it's the committee. And I think that you have done a great job for the city.
Mr. McQuiston, as the 6th member of the committee, what I would suggest is you come up, as soon as she leaves this chair, sit in it, and Eric won't be able to appoint anybody. He's just coming to grab that shit. Before the cars move, adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to be roasting for pure sacrifice.